Hey everybody, Tekking101 here, and today's video is about America. And the home of the brave. Yeah, that one. Specifically, we're going to be discussing One Piece in America, or the United States. I guess I should clarify that as well, because here, where I'm at, saying America is synonymous with just saying the United States, but I know in other parts of the world, when you say America, it's just kind of this general region right here is America, but to specify the United States. And I'm going to be talking about not, like, one thing in particular, like the sales in America or the anime in America. I am going to be referencing those things, but it's really how One Piece is over here, and it's something that made me kind of interested in it because I understand how much of a huge phenomena One Piece is in Japan. It's like the biggest cash cow there, and even if people don't watch anime in Japan, they would know what One Piece is. It's kind of like with Superman. I'm not really into comic books, but I know all about Superman. Also in Japan, you have all these attractions that are centered around One Piece. The one that comes to mind is the One Piece, Tokyo Tower thing. It's got the restaurant and the gift shop, and you could freaking play a Frankie pinball machine, and you could sit next to Law, and God, I need to go here at some point in my life. But despite One Piece being so popular in Japan, and generally it is popular worldwide, and it is the best-selling manga of all time. It sold something like 420 million tankobons over the 20-year period of One Piece. Despite all that, in America, by and large, not a huge following in the sense of, like, not a lot of people have probably heard of One Piece or really know about it in terms of, like, what the story is or the characters or anything like that. Like, if you go up on the street and ask people, like, have you ever heard of One Piece? Do you know what One Piece is about? They're probably going to be looking confused more than anything. On the other hand, though, if you ask them about other stuff, like, relating to anime, like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, they would probably at least have a basic idea. Even if they're not into that kind of stuff, they would still have a basic idea of it. One Piece is kind of the thing, it's like, wow, it's so popular in this part of the world, everybody kind of knows about it, but over here, it's just kind of like, a few people do. If you're fans of anime, of course you know about it, but for most people, they don't really encounter it all too much. And that got me thinking, and it basically comes down to the fact that One Piece was not a cultural phenomenon here in the States, like Pokemon was. Pokemon was really the big driving force that just slammed it over your head here in America. Like, this is this thing called anime, and here you go, and it's seeped into our culture in ways that we really haven't seen since. Like, there were Pokemon, like Pikachu Pop-Tarts sold in stores, and there was cereal, and everybody knew about it, even though if you didn't really understand it, okay? We've never had anything like that since. And even though there were anime that aired, before Pokemon was around, of course, you had things like Yu Yu Hakusho and Dragon Ball, even earlier on in the late 80s, early 90s, probably the thing that a lot of old school anime fans will reference is the movie Akira, as well as Ninja Scroll. Those were like the old school ones, and of course Voltron as well, that was a big one. But it was really underground back in the early 90s. The Pokemon, boom of the 98 really, slammed it into our culture. Oh, and side note here, but if you are a fan of old school Pokemon, like the Indigo League, like the nostalgia trip, back in the gotta catch 'em all time frame, and if you want to go and relive that experience in like a new way, there is a YouTube channel I think you would definitely enjoy, That Dude in the Suede, or just Suede as he goes by now. This guy, he was one of the first inspirations for me to start this channel. Like, he's been around since like 2008, and right now he has a series on his channel where he's going through literally every single episode of the Pokemon anime from episode 1 back in the Indigo League, and he analyzes it and breaks it down in all these interesting ways. He's a really, really informative guy, really puts a lot of effort into his videos, and I'm a patron of his, so I would definitely go check him out. I think he deserves a lot more subscribers than he has. So yeah, if you're a fan of Pokemon, and you'll like his channel, trust me. After that, it kind of opened the floodgates a little bit more. Anime became something that was a little bit more profitable, something that you could actually air on television that people are going to watch, and so you had a lot more anime being dubbed into English and being localized or Americanized, as some people put it, because it wasn't dubbed the same way that anime is dubbed now. The dubbing process is pretty simple. You take the anime, you keep the same soundtrack for the most part, keep the same opening. You don't give the characters weird, wacky accents for no reason. You don't change the overall script of the anime all too much. Maybe if there's like some really big thing in the script that clashes, like there's some sort of joke that only works in Japanese, I can understand that, why you would have to, convert it into something American, or if there's some cultural thing that Americans wouldn't understand because it's from Japan, that's understandable, you have to change that. But for the most part, it's a very professional kind of industry right now. But back in the 90s and the early 2000s, you did have things where, you would give characters wacky accents for no reason. Like the ones I remember the most, the most prominent to me, in Yu Yu Hakusho, you had Gene, who was like a wind demon, and for some reason they gave him an Irish accent. He's a demon. They don't have Ireland in Demon World. Or Juice from Dragon Ball Z. He's an alien from some weird planet that we don't know anything about. Or I guess it must be Space Australia, because he has an Australian accent for some reason. Yeah, and then it's the weird thing like that. The swapping out of soundtracks was also a really big one. I don't know if it was an issue with licensing, or it was actually, I think it was a lot more cost effective back in the day, because anime probably wasn't as popular back then as is now, but it was a lot cheaper to remove the original soundtrack and make your own. The problem with that is a lot of times the soundtrack was done on like a shoestring budget, very cheap, and the soundtrack was much inferior to the original. And so you had those kind of problems going into it. And basically, what all this leads up to is... And thus, if we stare into the abyss, perhaps the abyss will stare back at us. It is time to discuss the 4Kids dub now, children. Put down the knife! Just hold tight. Alright, look. Despite everything that I've bitched about the 4Kids dub, and I have a whole series on my side channel, Tekking101, which basically consists of me just picking out random episodes of the 4Kids dub, watching it with my fans, some of which are probably high as kites, and just laughing and making fun of it and beating it over the freaking head, and it's funny, it's just a good kind of night's entertainment. But despite all the faults of 4Kids, you have to understand that it is the way that a lot of American fans got into the One Piece story. This was their first introduction into it. Maybe you were lucky. Maybe you had a pretty decent internet connection back in 2004, and you were able to stream subbed episodes or raw episodes of the Japanese, One Piece in its full glory, and you can understand Japanese, and you understood it that way. Maybe you were fortunate like that, but for most people, the way you got introduced to the anime was 4Kids living in the States, just as how it goes. And despite the problems I have with 4Kids, probably the major ones are the ones we already discussed. The really poor quality just in terms of swapping out soundtracks not really fitting the theme or the tone of the original, the goofy accents, which in the case of 4Kids, it was really a sense of like, they didn't really have a large voice acting staff to work with, so it was kind of just like, instead of paying more money for a new voice actor, it was changing up the voices, adding some accents to it, and boom, you have a whole new voice for a whole new character. There was the issue with that. The really stupid edits. But let's throw all that stuff on the back burner for now. Let's just set that aside. That stuff does still exist, and it is something that drags down the quality. But let's look into what 4Kids really had to do, and a lot of problems that didn't really all involve 4Kids, bringing One Piece into America, and how that worked with the localization and all that stuff. And if you want a better look into all of this stuff, go and watch a YouTuber by the name of Mother's Basement. I'm sure probably most of you know about him. He did a video it was made a few months back, I just saw it recently, but it was in defense of 4Kids, where he really goes in depth and discussing like a lot of, what 4Kids, why they had to do what they did and stuff like that. So I'm going to give you like an abridged version, but if you want a better look into it, go watch his video. So initially, just bringing an anime from Japan to bring over here into the West and air on Western airwaves, there's going to be some problems just out of the gates, just in the sense that there are things that are permissible to air on Japanese TV, at a certain time. The One Piece anime airs at 9:30 a.m. Sunday mornings in Japan. 9:30 a.m. on Sunday mornings. In America, in the West, that is a time bracket that is most set aside for small children. We're not just talking about 10, 11, 12. We're talking about like toddler age. Like 9 o'clock or 9:30 in the morning, that's the time slot I remember watching like Sesame Street or Barney growing up. Like Dora the Explorer, SpongeBob, is Bob the Builder still a thing? Is Bob the Builder still on? Bob the Builder was awesome. I love Bob the Builder. Teaching kids how to play with electrical equipment at a young age. That's great. Yeah, that's what is in America. And you look at One Piece and you see the stuff that's in One Piece, and it's like, there is no way that this could air at that time bracket in America. And it's just a cultural thing, really. The standards in practice in Japan are not as strict with sexual things. You know, like Nami's boobs about ready to pop out of her freaking shirt. Like, this would never air at 9 o'clock in the morning in America. You know, you'd be hard-pressed to show this on, like, a Toonami block, like, later into the night. This would be something that would definitely be on, like, Adult Swim. Like, this would be something that you just couldn't air at that time slot. The point is, they had to change things. So you have to understand that right out of the gate. That they had to alter some things, okay? So just complaining that 4Kids changed things from the original or had to edit things out, you know, it's good to poke fun at, like, seeing them covering up Robin's cleavage in increasingly hilarious ways, which is really a sin against nature, but I understand why they had to do that. Standards and practices and all that stuff, that's out of 4Kids' hands. They had nothing to do with that. That's practices set up by a much higher power than 4Kids Entertainment. It's not really even the sense that they had to change things in terms of, like, guns and stuff. It's their decisions in changing things that make people kind of scratch their heads and get people pissed off. Like, changing the Marines' guns to squirt guns. It's like, there's nothing else you could have changed that into. You couldn't have changed that into a sword or a staff. A squirt gun was the only thing you could have possibly changed that into. Sometimes they don't even change them into squirt guns. Sometimes they just change the color of it, and that's just odd stuff they had to do. You know what? I'm not even gonna complain about Sanji's lollipop cigarette thing, because that you cannot have a cartoon character, you know, airing at like 9 o'clock in the morning smoking a cig. You just can't do it in America. It's not going to happen. It's okay in Japan, not okay over here. That would definitely have not flown. I could see a mob of angry parents storming the gates of 4Kids as soon as that would air. Like, he's like, there's a guy smoking a cigarette at 9:30 in the morning here, and my kid's gonna, you know, he's gonna think smoking's cool, and that would have never flown. Now, the reason why they changed it into a lollipop, if you want to give me, like, just a basic reason why they did it, I would assume probably because it would have been too much of a pain in the ass to edit out Sanji's cigarette in every single scene, so that's why they probably left it, they changed it up to a lollipop so they could still keep it and didn't have to edit it out in every single scene, and they could still make jokes about it. So that stuff, you know what, I'm not even really all that mad about in general, because there's worse things to discuss here. One of the things about the 4Kids dub that sucks is that they definitely geared it more toward children because of the way that they had to localize it. So I'm not even talking about cutting out all the blood and the cleavage and the guns and shit. I'm talking about how they literally changed the dialogue to make it much more kiddie, like adding in really stupid jokes and puns and making like really serious characters like Crocodile, who had one of the better 4Kids voices in the entire bunch. Crocodile and Zorro had really good American voices in the 4Kids dub that I actually would have been fine with if they kept them in the Funimation. Yeah, you have characters like Crocodile making jokes about like, hey, Straw Hat, you know, I made a desert toilet and you're desert doo-doo, get it? Because it's like I made a sand trap that you're falling into.
A lovely way to describe it, Straw Hat. That makes you desert doo-doo.
And it's just lame-ass pun after pun. And something else that I noticed upon watching all these old episodes of the 4Kids dub on my, like, side channel is that if you really look into it, there's some, like, weird sexual like jokes that are like in the background, like what is that for? Like there was the episode where they were like Usopp was interrogating Robin, after Alabasta, you're gonna join the crew, I'm gonna interrogate you, I'm Detective Usopp. And there's a scene where Usopp asks Robin like
so what do you do best?
Okay, are they gonna f it up?
Rubouts.
Oh god, what the f do I do with that?
so no, that's like a straight up, she just said, Usopp asked her, what's your specialty? And she pretty much just answered, I give a awesome hand job. I can rub people out. That's what a rub out. Oh my god damn. Oh no, it's a term for killing. I get that, but it's way more well known as a hand job. You're not salvaging this one. It ain't happening. So that's the reason most people dislike the 4Kids dub, is because they took away a lot of tension, they took away a lot of the weight of the anime and character motivations and everything like that, and they geared it more toward like, like this is a character's epic moment. Well, let's ruin it with a horrible pun or joke that would not land in a first grade classroom. Okay, like that's the stuff we're talking about here. Also, the fact that they skipped a lot of arcs, leading to a lot of continuity errors later down the line that they had to deal with. They skipped over the Little Garden arc. They skipped over Laboon. For some reason, they left the Rainbow Mist arc in. But yeah, that was the situation with 4Kids. But I'll tell you, now those were the negatives. Going into the positives here, it did at least keep the basic act structure of One Piece. Aside from the arcs that they skipped, which was a problem, they kept the overall narrative the same. Luffy still wants to be king of the pirates, Zoro wants to be the best swordsman, fight against Mihawk, all that stuff is still there. The main villains of the arc, while now a little bit more goofy, are still the main villains of the arc. So what I'm trying to get across here is watching 4Kids One Piece as a child, and then later on in life, getting into the manga, I at least understood who these characters were from the 4Kids dub. For instance, I started reading the One Piece manga on a weekly basis when I was a sophomore in high school, and this was during the Impel Down arc. Impel Down features a lot of reintroductions to Buggy and Baroque works like Galdino, Mr. 3, Mr. 2, Bon Clay, Mr. 1, Crocodile. And I'm reading this manga, and I'm seeing these characters, and I at least knew who they were, barring Mr. 3, because Little Garden was removed, but I knew who Buggy was, and I knew who Crocodile was, and I knew he tried to take over Alabasta, even though, they really messed up his character in the 4Kids. I at least understood the basic setup. So later on, I went back and watched the first, East Blue saga and the Baroque Works saga from the Funimation dub, and some episodes in the Japanese, so I get the full weight of really what they were going for in terms of tone. But it did at least help me get into the story. It at least told me, like, the story, even though it's bogged down so much, I still know this is something I enjoyed. So I at least understood the concept, and Luffy becoming king of the pirates, all these abilities, and devil fruits, although it was cursed fruits in the 4Kids dub. I like that concept. So, yeah. Now, I'm not going to go the extra 1,000 miles and say that if it wasn't for the 4Kids dub, I wouldn't be a fan of One Piece, because I most certainly would have. Because it was one of the big three. I was reading Naruto and Bleach weekly in Shonen Jump. It was just a matter of time until I eventually stumbled upon One Piece and started tackling One Piece and reading that. So I'm not going to go that route with it, but it did introduce me into the concept of the story at a young age, and for that I am grateful, even though you could have done a better job. And as for the rap, his name's Zoro, he's just like a samurai, he's just an L-A-D-Y, Nami's not shy. I liked it. I liked it as a kid. I had an old tape recorder as a kid, a big, bulky tape recorder that actually took cassette tapes. I recorded the damn opening, and I would listen to it over and over again. And it's a song that is, you know what? If 4Kids' goal there was like, we need to, we're aiming this at children, so therefore we need to make an opening that's just catchy for the kids. What's that? The kids are into this rap thing? Well, let's make it a rap then. even though it ruins the tone of the story, really. It doesn't really fit well with One Piece. An old, late 90s, early 2000s rap doesn't really work with it all too much. But their goal was to have it catchy, and kids would enjoy it, and I did find it catchy, and I did enjoy it. So that's how that goes there. Really don't have much to say about that. But now, moving on from the dark era that is 4Kids, moving on to Funimation, who is the current company that is dubbing One Piece in America, that's putting out all the DVDs and all that stuff, and has done a, what's that word I'm thinking of? Good job! They're doing a good job of it. But we're still not entirely done with 4Kids, because Funimation, during the early days when they began dubbing One Piece, kind of had to pick up after 4Kids. Allow me to explain. So the last episode that 4Kids dubbed that was aired on American television was episode 143. It was the last episode of the Rainbow Mist arc. Once again, I don't know why, for some reason, they decided to ixnay Little Garden, but they decided to dub the Rainbow Mist. I don't know. But at the end of the Rainbow Mist arc, at the very end, you had the beginning of Skypiea. You had the giant boat falling from the sky and landing on the Mary, right? That episode, the last episode aired by 4Kids, aired on September 22nd, 2007, right? The very next week, episode 144 aired, the beginning episode of the Jaya arc and the Skypiea saga. This was the first episode dubbed by Funimation, so there wasn't even a break. It wasn't like 4Kids stopped and then a few months later Funimation picked it back up. It was seamless. And I remember watching that episode for the first time and being like, what the hell? All the voices are different. Like, what is this? The voices, the title cards, the soundtrack, it's all different. What is this? The theme song is different. They went to the Bon Voyage, which is the third One Piece opening. They switched it over to that in a span of 1 week. So that was very jarring to a young Tekking. Like, what the hell just happened? But the problem is, even though Funimation was now the one dubbing it, they had to leave a few things in that the 4Kids, because it was right after the 4Kids dub, there was no break, so it wouldn't make any sense to change, like, names, because yes, 4Kids decided to change character names. For example, they changed Portgas D. Ace to Portgas D. Trace. Why they did that, I don't know. I can't really get a straight answer out of any, like a definitive answer from any source. Some people say it's because Ace relates to poker, which is gambling, which we can't have that because gambling is evil. It even doesn't really make any sense. Like, I played poker as a kid. I think every kid did. Like, solitaire is on your computer. Those have aces in it. Whoa! Other explanations I heard why they changed it to Trace is that Ace is a type of alcohol, and they wanted to downplay the connection to it. I don't think that's accurate, though. I think that was, like, just a way to really push in, oh, yeah, look how stupid 4Kids is. They changed the character name just because of an obscure name. I think it's like a champagne or something. But I was probably going to say the gambling aspect, if anything, but I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so the Funimation dub, when starting Jaya, like when Ace appears on Buggy's ship at the beginning of that arc, they still had to keep his name as, like, my name is Portgas D. Trace. You could just call me Trace. Had to keep that in, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. Now, the Funimation dub kept up the American release up until like halfway through Skypiea. I remember they finished out Jaya. The last episode I remember watching on American television of One Piece before it stopped was this episode right here. Enter God Eneru, Farewell to the Survivors. That is the last one I remember seeing. And then after that episode, I don't remember One Piece being on the air for a while. Or it might have just been reruns or something like that. At least I don't even think there were reruns. I think it just stopped. I think I think they eventually finished out Skypiea in Australia. The Funimation dubbed it, I understand, but I didn't get to watch those episodes until much later. Now, what Funimation did, though, is at this point, they went back to episode 1. They began dubbing everything with the new voice cast, keeping the original soundtrack, the original openings. There was even some good English versions of the original One Piece openings. They were actually really good, especially the second opening, Believe, was a really good English cover. I think they also did one for Bon Voyage and in the fourth one as well. They even did an English version of some of the endings that were pretty solid, I have to admit. I think after a while they stopped dubbing them in English, and now they're just back to the original Japanese, which is fine as well. But it was actually high quality production what they did. So yeah, they went back and they did the original East Blue Saga. They released the DVDs of them, and that brings us up to where we are now. One Piece is now dubbed and airs on Toonami, which is now part of Adult Swim, and I believe they're up to Saba Only. They might be already up to Impel Down and Marineford, because I don't really... Well, I've already seen those episodes because it gets released online long before it airs on American television, but that's really where One Piece's place is right now in America. It's in DVD format, and the Tankobons, of course, and it's airing on Toonami. So it doesn't really have as much of an attention as a lot of anime did in the late 90s and early 2000s. You know, and honestly speaking, 4Kids really should have not... I think I heard that when 4Kids acquired One Piece, they didn't acquire it specifically. They acquired One Piece in a package deal with, like, all these other anime, like Shaman King and Yu-Gi-Oh! And all this stuff. And they didn't really look at One Piece, like, by an episode-by-episode basis, and when they started dubbing it, they started to realize that a lot of this stuff really wouldn't play well with American television standards and practices and stuff like that. So that was really, I mean, it's a problem on their end. They really shouldn't have dubbed it to begin with, but, you know, that's the story there. And now 4Kids has been kind of forgotten. It went bankrupt, and I think they're under the name 4 Licensing Corporation or something like that now. But they're not making anime anymore. At least I hope they're not. Yeah, so, you know, that's the history of One Piece now in America, and... Is it going to ever be as big as in Japan or other parts of the world? Probably not. Every now and then, I think, like, when there's a One Piece movie that comes out, it gets an English dub, it gets, like, a limited theatrical release in, like, major cities, but nothing, like, as big as, like, Pokemon would have ever been or anything like that. Like, that's just never gonna happen. But that's what it was like growing up as a One Piece fan in America, starting out with 4Kids, and then Funimation changing things, and then eventually going back. And there was the manga as well. Shonen Jump had, like, an American release where they kind of slimmed down the magazine to only the most popular series, like Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh! And there was, like, Naruto. That's where a lot of people got exposed to Naruto. And One Piece was in there as well, but eventually the manga, you know, magazine began to get discontinued, and it used to be sold in stores. I remember that, going to Walmart once a month and getting the new issue of Jump. It was monthly here, weekly in Japan. They eventually stopped doing the actual paperback releases of the magazine, and they moved everything online. So I could see a lot of people getting into maybe One Piece that way too, but it was a lot more exposure to the 4Kids dub on American television than it was reading a magazine, picking up a weird backwards comic book in the store that not a lot of people knew about manga back then, but yeah. So that's the situation. If you grew up in this country, how did you get exposed to One Piece? What was your story of how you got into it? Or if you live in another country, what it was like? You know, despite all the censorship and everything that happened here with 4Kids, I know in a lot of other countries, it was way worse. Like in, like, Middle Eastern countries and stuff, they had to go, like, an extra mile beyond just editing cleavage. I've seen a few censors where they've had to, like the one I remember seeing is Nojiko from, you know, Kokoyashi Village, you know, Nami's sister. They didn't just edit out her cleavage, they had to, like, add an entire, like, long sleeve outfit for her, because women showing their arms, ooh, that's scandalous. So, I mean, it was bad here with 4Kids, but it got so much worse in other parts of the world, so it's just kind of like, I guess just kind of like, lesser of two evils, I guess? I don't know, just take what you get, really, and just be happy with it, I suppose. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Remember to check out those 2 channels I mentioned, Mother's Basement and Suede, over here in the cards. Thanks for watching. Tekking101 signing out. Later, everyone.